Aujourd'hui, on est très content de recevoir Dan qui travaille pour une boîte qu'on ne connaît pas assez, qu'on connaît trop peu en France, qui est Intuit. Généralement, quand on en parle, on n'a pas du tout le même feedback en termes de notoriété que les grands, pourtant, qui sont exactement à la même valorisation que Intuit, que ce soit Twitter, que ce soit LinkedIn. Et pourtant, cette boîte fait des merveilles et est en train de se développer à l'international. Et c'est dans cette optique qu'on a la chance de le recevoir là. Je ne vais pas l'introduire plus longtemps parce qu'il le fait très bien. On va switcher en anglais. Désolé de ne pas avoir fait l'introduction en anglais. Mais avant tout, je vous demande de faire un tonnerre d'applaudissements pour Dan parce que ça va être un beau moment. Merci beaucoup.
All right, that was a long introduction and that I didn't understand a word of, but I didn't hear the word asshole in there anywhere. I'm Dan Wernikoff. As you can see, I run a division at Intuit. It's called the Small Business Group. I thought I'd start with a couple questions just to get a sense of who's in the audience and answer them honestly. I won't take this personally. How many of you, before you got this meetup, knew who Intuit was? Raise your hand. That's not bad. How many of you know what TurboTax is? Same group. Are any of you American that were raising your hand? Okay, so a couple of those are know from the American markets. How about QuickBooks? How many people know what QuickBooks is? Prior to this meetup, just in the front rows. That's interesting. That says something right there. All right, well, I hope today what I want to do is give you a little bit of background on Intuit, then give a little bit of background as well on what financial management is like in the US and what we think entrepreneurs especially should be doing when they think about financial management. And then I also want to talk about something that's emerging, which is QuickBooks has really started to become a platform. And one of the opportunities as well, especially for this group, is if you're trying to reach a small business audience, a great way to do it is going to be through QuickBooks. And it already is, and I'll give some examples. So those are the three things that I want to accomplish today. And I'm going to start. That didn't work, and neither did that. So I think I might have frozen. Oh, so weird. All right. All right, it's just on the screen, it's frozen. So who's Intuit? The guy that's on the left over there is Scott Cook. Scott Cook is the founder. He actually founded this company watching the behaviors of his wife. She was paying, her name's Signe, she was paying bills on a kitchen table in their house, and she was extremely frustrated as she was trying to balance her checkbook. And I know Signe very well. As Scott says, she's the smarter half of the Cook family. And yet she was trying to reconcile all of the different charges and understand what part of the money had already been taken from her bank account and what was still outstanding. And she felt like the whole process was just a big mess because she was sitting there with her checkbook and trying to understand what exactly existed in her bank account. At the same time, and this was back in 1983, the personal computer was really just starting to take off. And you had everything on DOS, and DOS looked beautiful. It looked like it was just, all these graphics and all these things that you could play with. And Scott married the two things. He took the checkbook and the UI of a checkbook, and he put it on a DOS screen. And so he leveraged a behavior that his wife already knew, which was how to write a check, and made it just work seamlessly with the PC, and then leveraged the power of the PC to do a bunch of jobs that Signe didn't want to have happen. And that product eventually turned into a product called Quicken. Quicken in the US market was the 45th mover in the market. So there were 44 other solutions in the marketplace that were doing personal finance, and it immediately shot to #1 through this innovation on really trying to play with a UI that emulated a real world experience. And that's where Intuit was born, with this mission, which was, by the way, the mission at launch, to improve our customers' financial lives so profoundly they can't imagine going back to the old way. And so what we really try to do is help consumers and small businesses manage their finances. So another thing about Intuit that's unique is it's been around for over 30 years. So we're a vintage software company. You know, it's sort of us and Microsoft that have been around that long and gone through so many different platform shifts. And one of the things that's very important to Intuit is behaving like a startup. When we think about it all the time, because we know that startups are disruptive, that it doesn't matter how good our single innovation is, it's more about continuing to evolve and change. And there's 3 different concepts that we have. One is called customer-driven innovation, and it's a very simple formula. You find an unmet customer need, and it's something that you or someone that you enable can do well and solve that problem well, and do it in a way that has a durable advantage. And if you unpack those 3 things, the first one is really knowing customers. You know, having a deep understanding of the behaviors that they have today. You know, the second one is, in a lot of ways, more about, is it something that you should be solving? You know, we have a very narrow focus on improving financial lives, so we don't go outside of that. We think we can solve those problems better than anybody. And then when you think about doing it with a durable advantage, you know, it's not just solving a workflow problem at this point. It really has to be a network effect for it to be durable. And so we think about, you know, looking at things like two-sided markets and how can we solve problems on both sides of the market. So very, very important concept to us. Second piece is we call design for delight. Again, goes back to customers. And actually, I think what's unique also about Intuit is you think about Silicon Valley, you have people like Google, you know, who really try to solve impossible problems. You know, they're thinking about how can they expand to these new marketplaces that haven't even evolved at this point. Or you have Apple that thinks very inspirationally and aspirationally. You know, they want to change the taste and behavior of consumers. We really stand for helping an existing person solve a really important problem in the moment. And we call it deep customer empathy. We do thousands of Follow Me Homes, which is really just a customer visit. And it's not about interviewing them, it's about watching them do their work and understanding what that they do that's inefficient and trying to help them solve it. So extremely important concept to us. Second piece, we call it you know, going broad than narrow. The idea of never really falling in love with your solution, really just continuing to think about what the problem is, and then be willing to try 20 things. And until you really have a good sense of a tailwind, you should be broad and then narrow it down and then start to accelerate on that idea when it catches. And you know, this is, you know, rapid iterations, lean startup, you know, stuff that you guys all know about. Third piece is the rapid experimentation, which says, okay, if you have that concept, now keep refining, refine. Non-stop experiments in the platform and in the product, and that's where you start to have the acceleration take off on the other side. You know, final piece here that's really important to us: a poorly drawn pizza. As a company, when you're a big company, you become stupid and inefficient. You just do. You know, 100 people making a decision is inefficient relative to 5 people making a decision. And the incremental benefit of those extra 95 people is a lot more time, a lot more politics. And so as a company, we're always thinking about how you can break these bigger teams into much smaller units that move much faster. And all 3 of these, the idea of finding the right problem, you know, experimenting and thinking about design and breaking your teams into component parts, is the philosophy of everything we do as a company. Now, how has it evolved? I mean, you think about where Quicken started. Quicken started as a DOS product, and it was not that pretty, and I've played around with it in DOS. And what's interesting about it, though, is a lot of the features, a lot of the core benefits of the product have remained very similar on the initial Quicken product. But it launched right at a time when there was a platform shift going on. The platform shift was DOS to Windows. And that was a scary time for us because Microsoft also decided they wanted to enter the personal finance space. And they owned Windows. And so you can imagine they had a good way to distribute their product to their customers. Now, the good news is we held them off. And we did that through lots of different innovative ways that we approached the channel. What's also really interesting is we started to notice interesting behaviors with our customers on Quicken. On Quicken, we started to see lots of businesses using it. And for the first 3 years, Scott said, oh man, these businesses I don't know what they're doing. They're using this thing totally wrong. And they're causing us lots of problems, and they should just get out of the product. And he fought it and fought it and fought it until year 4 or 5, when it kept growing and growing. He said, you know, there must be some idea in here that businesses hated double entry accounting. The idea of them having to understand accounting, it pissed them off because they started their business to actually do something, do their craft, and they ended up doing a lot of things that they felt like were a waste of time. And Quicken inadvertently solved a lot of the problems. It didn't do accounting well, but it helped them track all their information, and then they could give that information to an accountant. And the accountants, you know, they didn't like it, but they were also just dealing with Excel and shoeboxes and things like that. And so over time, we started to refine it into a product that was actually designed to solve both problems for small businesses and the accountants and make their collaboration better. And I'll talk about why I think that's important to you guys as well in a minute. The other thing is we realized that when people start managing their personal finances, eventually they have a compliance event, and it's called taxes. You know, they absolutely have to pay taxes. And so our customers that were using Quicken started to ask us to use that data to help get a head start on filing their taxes. Now, in the US, taxes are totally different. Consumer taxes are totally different than France, but this is a highly complex problem and one that TurboTax solves very well. When we started to build TurboTax, we realized, oh, we've got this amazing tax engine. It solves all these, you know, huge compliance issues. We might as well also help professional tax preparers as well. And so we launched a pro tax solution as well, and also acquired a company called Lacert. And so now all of a sudden we had this whole suite of products, but we also had another platform shift to the web. And you can see every one of our products we brought over to the web and did it early in the platform with the idea that if we weren't there quickly trying to actually disrupt our own space, we knew that someone else would disrupt us. A great example, QuickBooks Online, which is now our flagship product, was launched in the year 2000. And actually was launched well before any small business was willing to take the risk of putting their financial data online, and before any accountant, and that's the big thing, any accountant would ever recommend it. And so we sat pretty stagnantly for basically almost 10 years with an online product that had very little adoption. But we had a lot of patience, and it's working out a lot better for us now. Same thing on TurboTax Online. At this point, you know, we do a huge amount of the tax returns in the United States, and same thing with Mint, which we actually acquired. Quicken was the one product that we had that didn't make the shift on platform that well, and we saw a disruptive solution in the marketplace and acquired it, and Mint became, you know, the online version of personal finance for Intuit. And then you can see it just immediately went to mobile. We have, on TurboTax, for instance, we have a concept of a W-2, which is a summary of your income for the year. At this point, you can just take a snapshot of it and file your taxes with that snapshot. It OCRs in. You know, we have QuickBooks Online mobile. Same thing with Mint Mobile. Mint Mobile is, you know, probably one of the most popular applications in the US from an active user perspective. So overall, it's now this big ecosystem of business. Now, we think of it as consumer, small business, and accountants, and there's a lot of synergy that you get serving all of them. QuickBooks, the area that I run, is about a $2.2 billion business. We have 4,000 or 5,000 employees, about 5 million businesses using it. It's a great business from a standpoint of I get to work with the people that I love the most. Both my parents were small businesses. There's nothing more exciting than watching a business grow. There's also a wide range of businesses. You know, on one hand, you have lifestyle businesses where it's much more about doing what their personal passion is and having the flexibility to do it. On the other hand, you have very mission-driven companies that are all about trying to scale and grow and change something. The latter one's clearly my favorite because I'm pandering to all of you. And you know, it's a good thing to say if there's a bunch of people in here who are doing this other side. The reality is I also like it because the way that QuickBooks works is we actually help businesses like you and also depend on businesses like you. So on the help side, we help small businesses manage their finances. And it's one of the most important elements of a small business. We do a great amount of surveying in the US specifically, where we'll see you know, the bulk of small businesses that fail in the US they say that they fail because of cash flow. And a lot of the times, that's just bad management of a business and the fact that they didn't have visibility into that bad management of their business. And so that's the problem that we try to solve. When you think about QuickBooks, it helps track money coming in, it helps track money going out, and what it does is it gives you lots of insights on that data. It helps you think about what's really working and what isn't working in your business, and then it also helps you take all of that data and send it to the right accounting professional and get your taxes done quicker, more efficiently, with a better outcome. Now, the other thing that QuickBooks does is it's a platform. We have over 850,000 paid subscribers on QuickBooks Online. We still have about 3 million customers on our desktop product, but the online product at this point is growing over 50% in active subs annually. Last quarter, we added 100,000 customers, and we're starting to see developers catch on that this is a great way to actually reach a small business. We have, in QuickBooks Online, we also do payments and payroll. Payroll is a little bit different in the US than it is in France. What's interesting is we have 400,000 online payroll customers. We have 250,000 electronic payments customers. And really, all we did was market it through QuickBooks. So the only thing we did was in the right point of the product. You know, if you think about an invoice, for instance, when you send out an invoice, we said, wouldn't you want to get paid electronically with that invoice? And we're starting to see a lot of third-party developers say, well, can you also market this in there? And can you help me think about where I should integrate it into your product? And all of a sudden, their product can travel to the US and serve a different set of businesses. So those are the two areas. Now, if I think about the financial management side, this is a very US-centric view. It's probably different here. But I think if it's different in a nuance. So most of the small businesses or enterprises in the US start with almost no cash. We're talking about 2/3 of them have less than $10,000. And what's interesting to watch is 3/4 of them are funding themselves. So it's their $10,000. And the third piece is, when you start to look at what happens to them, after 5 years of them, half are gone. And they have probably put in a lot more than that $10,000 at that point. And the problem that we keep seeing is that small businesses that outsource their finances end up in a bad place because they don't have visibility into what's working and what's not. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of engineers specifically don't want to spend a lot of time managing their finances. They want to go code. And what they do is they give this responsibility to their bookkeeper. And their bookkeeper is looking at things and don't have as much passion for the business as they might. And all of a sudden, they may have a problem. Now, I know that I'm not sitting here in front of you saying that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to say that right now. But we do buy a lot of companies. So my group last year bought 10 companies, half of them global. And there were some patterns that you can see in those acquisitions. The first one is, all of them had been in business for 5 years. There's a couple we recently added that were in the exact right spot at the right moment, where we thought, this would be a good pickup. But almost all of them were very durable businesses, and they were fanatical about burn rate. Fanatical to the point of they knew exactly how much money they had. They knew exactly how many employees they had, and they were in their books as much as their accountant. When you went to visit these people and you asked any question about the business, not the product, they knew the answer. They didn't point to anybody else. So we saw this. One of my favorite stories is Rick Barry at DemandForce. We bought for close to $400 million. He didn't raise money until a couple of years before we bought him from Excel. He raised $20 million, and when we bought him, he had $20 million in the bank. He never touched the account, didn't even know where it was, had no interest in that money. He was going to self-fund everything, and thought of his raise with Excel as something very different, something more about a partnership and networking with the VC and access to a network than anything tied to raising money. He knew where every dime was. Second thing is, there were quite a few of the ones that we've acquired would say there were points of when they were growing extremely fast where they made mistakes and almost couldn't make payroll. And the idea here is being extremely successful, but not really understanding your cash flow. And that means you could be growing in a way that's completely irresponsible and putting the business at risk to the point of either doing damage to your employees or doing damage to the business. And this is something that happens once usually with a successful company before they correct it and really start to get closer to their finances. But if it happens once, oftentimes it's the end of the company. The third one is bad customers can kill you. You hear a lot of the companies, specifically that we bought, talk about how hard it was to figure out which customer they should serve. And many of them really start to cut the data and understand it. And customers can do crazy things like use you as credit. A lot of them can use you as a support resource excessively. There's all these types of things, and it's hidden in your data. It's maybe someone on the staff knows what's going on, but unless you're looking at the finances, you're not going to see these patterns that would make you rethink who you should be talking to. So all of those are opportunities. So the one thing I would say though is at the end of the day, no one's successful because they manage their books well. At the end of the day, all the companies that we acquire, it's really about the people, the culture, the innovation, but it can kill you. And so it's really important to be on top of it. Now, the partnership side is interesting. I talked about the growth. We'll top, we think, 1 million customers on QuickBooks Online by the end of this fiscal year for us, which is by August. And so we're seeing pretty phenomenal growth. We have 7 quarters of accelerated growth rate. For a product of this size, to see it continue to accelerate every quarter is pretty exciting. What I think is even more interesting is all this data we're accumulating. So if you look over here, about $1.5 trillion flows through QuickBooks Online. 1 in 12 employees in the US are actually paid by our payroll service. So if you look at, there's some really interesting things. I've had the engineers poke through all of our data. There are 6 billion customer names in QuickBooks. Now, obviously, that you could say that must be some kind of error. All of our names are in like 25 files. So we're all, use so many QuickBooks service providers as consumers that our names are spread all over. So everybody who's in the United States that's legal is probably in a QuickBooks file somewhere. So all of this data is sitting there. We do this is old data, 100 million invoices a year that go through QuickBooks. That number is actually probably closer to 200 million at this point because of the growth that we've had this year. Now what's really fun is you start to see what companies are doing with this data. There's a company called Fundbox that takes our invoices and they call it clearing them, which means that they basically give you money as a business to just sign over your invoice to them. So they're giving you a loan. And for anybody who does have a cash flow need or who has an opportunity, usually what you hear is opportunity. I need to spend some money and I know I'm going to get some money back later, but no one will lend me money. In this case, they just figured out how to do it with our invoice and all of a sudden they're giving that value to our customer. Now, the interesting thing is that's just one of 800 companies that are doing this, and they're thinking about all different ways to innovate on top of our data. And this part is just starting to emerge. So, France. We've been in 4 focus countries out of the US for the last 3 years. So we have the US, we have the obvious ones, we've got Canada, UK, Australia, Commonwealth countries. If you're into tax, you'd start to understand why. Clearly all of those countries were conquered by the same person at one time and they all use the same tax code. Now you start to think about growth there. We're starting to show really good growth. We're now doing around 150 to 200% growth outside of the US. And we started to think, where are we going to go next? And we said, let's go to the most challenging environments we can. And we chose France. Yes. Where would it be really hard to succeed? This is how smart we are. There's actually some rationale around it. We like to go to markets where there's an incumbent. We actually like to be somewhere where someone big exists that's established a market but is not navigating a platform shift well. And you guys have that here. We like to go places where it is complex. What we try to do is make very complex things simple. And it's actually defendable for us to be in the hardest environment because we have more resources and more experience than anybody else. And so France is actually an obvious place for us. We're also going to Brazil as well, which is, if you know the tax code in Brazil, there's something like 2 or 3 changes in Brazil to the tax code every day. So, these are really scary environments that force you to think about how to solve a problem differently. Clearly, you have to, start to pull the compliance component of what you do outside of a release of the product, because you don't want to do 3 or 4 releases a day in the product itself. And you have to start thinking about how you can leverage the user base that you have and crowdsourcing some of the compliance needs. So there's all types of innovation that's happening due to it. But we're really excited about the French market, primarily because you can see the entrepreneurial environment starting to rise up. And again, that's why we're really interested in the family. We're interested in the companies that they're serving and the companies that are working with them. And that's why we're here tonight. So I appreciate you listening, and I'm open to any questions you have. I love questions. I love the hardest questions you can give me. And hopefully we'll have a chance to partner either as a platform or to have you guys exposed to QuickBooks Online to help you run your business.
So who's up for the first question? We can wait for a bit. The French, they're really slow on the first question, and then everything is coming. Who's got a question? Because otherwise,
we got questions over here.
Hi, good evening. Congrats for the presentation. So I'm Bruno from PrestaShop. We have a US subsidiary. We're actually customer of QuickBooks for payroll services and as well for the accounting. I'd like to know if you're going to launch the payroll services in France as well, as it's very complex and usually it's also very expensive.
Yeah. So we wanted to be in a very complex market, and again, that's why we chose France. Payroll might be too complex. No, we're actually thinking about it. I think if we solve it in France, it would be in partnership with accountants. It's one of those things where, and by the way, I didn't mention this. A lot of times there's a misconception about when we enter a market that what we're trying to do is disrupt accountants. Actually, what we try to do is make the relationship between small businesses and their bookkeeper and their accountants much better. One of the little-known facts about QuickBooks Online is, we have do you guys know what Net Promoter is? It's like a satisfaction rating. QuickBooks Online Net Promoter score without an accountant is 40 points lower than if an accountant and the small business are working together. So there's a really important role that the accountant plays. And so sometimes we think, how are we going to solve this problem? We can solve it directly with the small business. In the case of managing finances, we want to give small businesses the access to data. You should be able to, on a dime, create a report that tells you anything about your business. And then when it gets really complex and you can get yourself in trouble, like establishing your own chart of accounts or trying to do payroll on your own in France, that's when we start thinking more and more about how do we get an accountant involved. So short answer is yes, we'll do it, but we won't do it like we did in the US. There's a question in the back. Oh, there's one right here. Mike, he's got the mic.
Sorry.
It'll go there next. Yep. Well, maybe not. Hang on 1 second. We're going to do this one here and then we'll go. Yeah, you got the mic. We have time.
Okay, so Dan, Amazing Press. My name is Francois, CEO at myerp.com. I have 2 questions for you. The first one is, why do you think that your competition like Xero is failing in the US, but dramatically failing? Even like putting off like hundreds of millions on the market. And second question is, you don't talk about QuickBooks Enterprise in your slide, and the switch from QuickBooks Offline to online is amazing, and the product is beautiful. What about QuickBooks Enterprise?
Yeah, those are 2 really good questions. Xero, for those of you who don't know, is a startup out of New Zealand, which is, I wouldn't call them a startup anymore. They're pretty established. And they created an accounting solution in New Zealand, then hopped over to Australia, and now have expanded into UK and US. It's a great company. They've done some stuff that I think has been pretty innovative around the accountant side. And they're not doing as well in the U.S. In fact, they've had a declining growth rate in the U.S. with a very small base of customers. I'd like to think they're failing because I'm really good. No, I mean, the reality is I was joking. Yeah. I mean, the reality is one of the things that's really important, and again, this gets to a channel that a lot of people don't think about, in our case, is accountants. Accountants, are an incredibly influential group that if you treat them well, if you solve problems for them, they're exceptionally loyal. And so in our case, we've done a couple things with accountants that have really made their lives easier, and they have no reason to change in the US. The second thing is we completely redesigned QuickBooks Online a couple years ago, and if you look at it, if you look at our products head to head, at the end of the day, QuickBooks Online is a better product by far in the US. And what's a universal truth, no matter how good you are, I think, at PR or marketing, small businesses, accountants, I mean, they use these products all the time, and they're going to make the decision based off of the best product. So I think that's helped us in the US, where admittedly we had a pretty big head start. We have a network effect with accountants already, and we have a really, really strong product with a full ecosystem there, payroll, payments, all those different things. The second question on enterprise, we do have a big enterprise business in the US, but for us, enterprise is probably defined in a different way than how you guys might define it. It's still companies with less than 100 employees, and the bulk of the companies have really less than 50 employees. And so you are talking about smaller, larger small businesses versus traditional enterprise. We don't offer an enterprise online product just yet, but it's an interesting story of how we even created the enterprise desktop product. We used to have a desktop product. We used to set list limits artificially because we were worried about the performance of the application. So you just could not enter a certain number of clients and transactions before we made the product kind of break for you, because we just didn't want to get into that business. And we had so many customers beg us to raise the lift limits and solve the performance problem, because their other alternative was to spend $50,000 versus $3,000, that we decided to enter that space. And you can imagine the same thing will play out in QuickBooks Online. Now that we have close to 1 million customers, we're starting to hear customers say, I'd like something that has more users, performs a little snappier, solves these 3 or 4 problems. We're about to roll out inventory, for instance, which is one of the biggest product gaps between our online product and our desktop. All of a sudden, we'll get drawn up into it. But we'll let the customers drag us there. One of the things that we're really good about is hearing customers ask for things before we just assume that it's, we know exactly what they want to be considered an enterprise solution. And we won't try to solve the problems that require us to change, how we go to market with, a complex sales organization, customized implementations. It's just not what we do. We do more consumer-centric software.
Hi. Are you going to partner with European fintech companies to provide new solutions and products?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the goal when I talk about us being a platform. By the way, we do the same thing in the US, and we partner with our competitors. Square is one of our important partners in the US. We offer merchant service. We have mobile payments. We have a philosophy of you have to be 100% open, and you have to enable your competition to use your product, because it keeps you honest. You can't just wall off the garden and give a worse experience, because over time that's going to kill the whole platform. And so absolutely, and that's part of the reason I really am pushing hard on explaining what the platform is, because we want developers there. I mean, we have about 1,000 engineers in my org. There's about 10 million engineers in the world, And so when you start to think about what could be created by other people versus what you can do inside your own shop, you absolutely at this point have to be open to anybody who's got a problem to solve for your customers. So very important. One other interesting thing, I don't know why I'm backtracking on thinking about the enterprise question. interesting anecdote, just to give you a sense of how powerful QuickBooks Online is. Google was using QuickBooks right before they went public. And they wanted to stay on it. And we just could not imagine trying to support them through that process. I mean, there's a thing in the US called Sarbanes-Oxley, and there's lots of different things that start to hit you. So the startup community in the US really embraces QuickBooks and think of it as a tool. And they like it because it works more like their applications versus the enterprise level type accounting solutions. So we'll keep stretching up into the bigger companies as well.
Hello, Dan. Hi, thanks for the presentation. And I had a question about your business development strategy in France. Since you're very successful, you're profitable, you can leverage almost all the means you want to conquer a market. What's going to be your strategy? Because when you're in consumer product, you work a lot and you depend a lot on marketing. And on the enterprise product, you're more into sales, account management structure. What would be your strategy, considering that you attack two markets simultaneously, which are small and medium business and accountants? Yeah,
well, that is kind of it. It's that we have a network effect business. If you think about what we do, accountants love our product and like working with it because the books come to them much cleaner than when it's done in Excel. And that means that they then start to recommend it back to other small businesses who are just getting started. And that is our network effect. And that's the thing that's very defensible and helped us when people like Microsoft entered the industry or when Xero's in the US. And so it's really important to serve both sides of our ecosystem. Right now, we're starting to reach out more actively to the accounting professionals in France. It's interesting. Because just like you, there are very young entrepreneurial accountants who say the practice of 10 years from now is going to be very different than the practice of today. And then you can imagine there's a lot of people who have absolutely no interest in changing their practice and have done it a single way forever and will remain that way. So we have a team that's really trying to assess who are the innovative accountants and who's willing to change a really established behavior. At the same time, we know that our bread and butter has been helping small businesses and having small businesses understand the benefits of QuickBooks and use it to the point where the accountants actually have to support it because so many small businesses adopt and have an interest in managing their finances through it that if the accountant wants to grow their practice, they're going to have to start supporting it as well. So it's sort of that virtuous circle. We have a business development people who are working directly with accountants. We have business development people working with startups and working with software solutions that are in the local market. And then we have quite a bit of direct marketing. But we also have a lot of discipline. So we're not coming into this market and trying to do something unnatural. We're not going to throw a ton of money at the market and try to win it that way. What we try to do is get a nice steady progress and get adoption in the market through real users actively finding and then using the product and then loving it.
Dernière question. Last question.
The last question always makes the pressure go up, doesn't it? Makes it a lot harder.
Hi, my question is about the methodology of project management used in your company. I would like to know why did you adopt the Lean Startup methodology and how it happened?
Good question. So one of the things that we're kind of blessed with is Scott Cook, our founder, still heavily engaged in the company. I meet with him probably every couple weeks to go through specific priorities, get his feedback, and get him engaging and coaching teams. Very, very early on, he became friendly with Eric Ries and got familiar with the methodology. It aligned with a lot of things that we were already doing, but what Eric Ries did was put it in a form that was really teachable and scalable. And one of the biggest challenges, again, when you become a big company, is how do you take ideas and get them to be consistent across the whole company. And so Scott recognized right away that the way he was talking about it was a way that everybody could understand. And he made it part of a process that we have, which is an annual process where we get every leader together. In fact, every December, Brad Smith, our CEO, and just the senior leadership team, we go off-site and we think of the 1 or 2 things that we want to train the whole org on. We have a long discussion about it. We talk about how we'd frame it. I remember the year we talked about Lean Startup. We then take it to the top 300 leaders of the company, and they start to train. We start to train them on the process, and then we take it to the whole company through different events. We have engineering events, product management events, marketing events, and it's interesting to watch the cycle of, it's basically 6 months where an idea that's essentially just a handful of people gets introduced, oftentimes by Scott or by Brad, and the fact that they know so many people in Silicon Valley that are really thinking on the cutting edge, and then just watch it get all the way through deployed through the company. It really is the secret sauce of Intuit. I mean, you realize that from a process standpoint, a big company can start to lose their edge, and the reality is the only thing that will make a company stay alive for 30 years is evolving, how they develop their software and really staying current with watching what the startups are doing primarily and trying to figure out a way where they can take that same process and apply it in a different way than you guys do. When you do Lean Startup, I'm guessing you go faster than us. I'm not gonna say that we're moving as fast as you, but we're moving faster than anybody at scale that I think is out there. So that's how we did it. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.